So like most moms, I don't love when my children call each other names, but when they do, my favorite is Disembodied Brain. Hello and welcome back to The Commonplace. My name is Autumn Kern and I am the proud owner of this phone. If you've been keeping up with my phone series, then you know this already. But I'm not calling it a dumb phone. I'm trying to unlearn the phrase dumb phone because this is a phone. It calls people, which is what a phone does. What it is not is a tiny computer. So we need to judge it according to the thing it is, and it is good. It is a good phone. However, in this series, I am talking about my end of the smartphone. I got rid of my smartphone. I think I'm in month 4 now, but I've already decided I'm never going back. In fact, it's been kind of interesting to hear people say to me, I really like what you're saying, but I just couldn't do it. Maps, music in the car, FaceTiming, things for work, my email, how will I check things when I have my kids around? I can't be on a computer. All these things that I too have thought over the last couple of years. And now that I'm on the other side and I've really had some distance from the smartphone, none of those things can make me come back. Isn't that interesting how that happens? You just need a little bit of space to kind of reorient and recalibrate and see what's happening. And I've actually really enjoyed this. So I do have a whole series. I'll be linking different videos from it above as we're talking today. But if you are new and you don't know what I set out to discover, I had 2 questions about the smartphone. The first was, are our smartphones forming us towards convenience? And does that love of convenience make us prefer machines over people? That was the first one. I've had some video and comment about that already. The second part was, are the smartphones cultivating the lie of old that we are like God in ways that we are not? Namely, do we think we are omniscient, omnipresent, and omnipotent? I've talked a little bit about the omnipotence, that we do feel like we can do more than our humanly limitations actually allow us to do well by just hopping really fast or multitasking when we shouldn't be, or this really quick on the phone. I've actually talked a little bit about that one, but today we're gonna talk about the other 2 parts of that, the omnipresence and the omniscience. And I'm putting it under this banner, which if you've seen today's title, of are smartphones making us modern day Gnostics? That's actually my question, because looping it all back together with the disembodied brains, my observation, and everything I say, I'm not just lobbying huge charges against the world outside of me. I'm talking about myself too, my own life, the things I've observed, especially now that I don't have the phone, looking back on my life. These are things I've thought myself, but do we actually opt into a life of being disembodied brains? That's what we're gonna talk about. So while I don't actually let my kids call each other that for too long, it is a real idea and it's something that I think will be helpful for this conversation. So buckle up, let's figure out what's going on. So in case you're wondering where in the world my kids got the phrase disembodied brains, because they're not sitting around talking about Gnosticism with me yet, it was actually from Madeleine L'Engle's book, A Wrinkle in Time. We read it last summer as a family read aloud and we really enjoyed it. And the bad guy in that is a disembodied brain. Now, as we launch into this, I do need to say that what I'm talking about could extend beyond the smartphone conversation into the internet and the way we are living today. But because I typically talk to moms, homeschooling moms, we often only access the internet through things like our cell phones, right? We have them in our back pockets. We're able to hop on them while the kids are around. We're not usually the people who have the time to sit at a desk on a computer. And so for us, it does happen in these tiny computers that we call phones. And so that is why I'm putting it in this conversation. But I do realize that if you're listening, you will notice that I'm talking about something much larger than just the phone. And I'm also not just talking about social media, which is typically the boogeyman and even the thing I poke at on here, but I'm talking about a lot of things. We do a lot of our life online. We do social media online. A lot of us work online. We make purchases online. We see doctors online. We learn online. For many people, we're still churching online after COVID. We make friends online. There are all sorts of activities of living, things that we as humans do to live that are now happening in an online sphere, in a 2-dimensional, separated virtual reality that is not around us. And that is where this conversation begins with disembodied brains. We now have the option to live without needing our bodies. Now, if you're gonna say, but yes, you do have your bodies, those thumbs have to type the comments on Instagram. Yes, I hear you. The body is on track, I think, to become a nuisance. Not right now, not quite yet, but I think we're headed in that direction, where the body is something that, like I shared in E.M. Forster's The Machine Stops, the short story that I talked about in my other video, people are living these virtual realities looking at a screen. That's where life happens. Yes, you have to toilet the body, you have to clothe the body, give it medicine, feed it. You have to provide for it, but it is just the thing that holds your brain. Your brain is able to access life through a screen in full view of ideas without your body actually having to move. That's true of the smartphone. You don't have to move to go to France, to see a friend, to learn a homeschooling thing. You can do all of that while sitting still looking at a small rectangle. That is not living. That is one part of you engaging in something while the rest of you is unnecessary. And that is why I'm calling this a disembodied brain. Your brain is separate from the rest of you. And yet, you think you're living. Now, I know. We are not fully there yet. The things I'm saying, we're not totally there yet. In fact, this could just be like a stay tuned for my forthcoming dystopian novel. It seems like that's what I'm teeing up with. But I do like to think about where things lead, because ideas have consequences. The way we live has consequences. The things we inherit as our norms set a course for our children, our grandchildren, our great-grandchildren, and they adopt the things we've passed on without questioning them. We've adopted a lot of things without questioning them. And that's something I'm gonna talk about in another video, these acts of gentle defiance. I'm actually gonna end today with a poem from Wendell Berry that has really encouraged me in saying no to certain parts of modernity. But I'm not actually trying to write a dystopian novel. I'm just looking for repeated lies that have messed people up before that come in new packages in every time and place. And so let's talk about the Gnostics. If you're not familiar, Gnosticism was an early church heresy. There's a lot to what they believed, but the thing I'm pulling out is that they did believe that the mind was superior to the body, to the point where the material, the fleshy, the humanness, that sort of stuff was kind of icky. It needed to be shut out. It was dragging us down in our spiritual life and, our flourishing, in our growth intellectually, cultivating the intellect and the mind. And it was, the fruit of that is you start to dislike the body. You start to dislike the material. And of course, the incarnation should have put that eternally to rest, right? Like, we shouldn't still have that heresy. God became flesh. Christ was incarnate. He gave such significance and value to the material, to the body, that we know that the body is not beneath the mind, that the body actually is called into service to Christ, that it is called into worship, that is actually an integral and necessary part of our moving and living and breathing and flourishing in God's world. And so you can't live without the body. You can't live well, at least. And that's kind of my point here. How much are we being drawn into a life of disembodiment through our smartphones into these two-dimensional realities that do not require our body? And then what will be the effect of that? How then will we view the body? I made a point in my convenience video that people are inconvenient. And so when we are constantly formed towards a machine which is clean and streamlined and efficient, we want that. And everything that's messy becomes less ideal. We don't want to have to deal with that. It seems harder to do that way, which means our kids might seem more difficult. People, real life-to-life relationships seem more difficult. Repenting and rejoicing and mourning with others seems more difficult. We prefer just double taps online or a sad little text message to someone else rather than showing up at their house and sitting with them while they get their snot all over our shirt because they're crying on us. We are losing a lot of human things here that I don't think we realize we're losing. And I think that's what's so dangerous about the modern world is that if you adopt the things we've inherited as the norm, because many of us, if you're around my age, maybe your first computer happened when you were around 10, 11, 5th, 6th grade. That's when we got our first computer. And so we've seen this shift. We can remember what it was like before then. We see the differences that our children are facing in their childhoods and trying to make friends with other kids and maybe what the norms are in their home and what they're allowed to do in terms of screens and phones and different things like that. And we still have a chance to remember, not that it was perfect back then, not that the 90s was a golden age or something, but we can remember when things maybe just were more humanizing. And maybe now they're not, is my point. And so I mentioned virtual reality. I've heard about Meta. I've heard there's gonna be a world where you can sit with little goggles on and you can shop and you can see your friends and you can go out to eat. And I would just say over my dead body. But it's coming. And when we do that, guess what? We lose reality. Who wants virtual reality when we have reality as given to us by God? There's a scene in The Silver Chair. Yes, that's a Narnia book. And Prince Rilian has been under this enchantment of an evil witch, right? And he lives down in this dark cave, and the two characters who come into Narnia go down there and they're trying to describe to the evil witch what the sun is, right? Prince Rilian can't remember Narnia. He can't remember what's outside of this cave. It's very platonic. And they're pointing to a light and they're saying that the sun is kind of like that. They're trying to describe the sun. It's kind of like that. It gives off, you can see by it and it warms you, and it's sort of like that, and they're having trouble. They're starting to forget what is real. And the witch, of course, is like, well, it sounds like whatever you're saying is a shadow of this real thing right in front of you. That is real. What you're describing is just a figment of that. It's a picture of that. It's not the real thing. It's totally backwards, right? The sun is real. The light is the shadow picture. It is the glimpse, the hint of what truly is the sun. And I think that we're starting to do that. And I have a personal example because, again, I'm not lobbying huge charges against you guys. I'm part of this too. So I've been privileged enough in my life to travel and live abroad quite a bit as a young adult. And when I first lived abroad in Italy, I did not have a smartphone. I didn't have one in the States before I left. I didn't have one while I was there through that time. And my experience was very unique for a lot of people who are traveling now, and they've kind of seen everything before they go online. And of course, I used Google to look up what museums I should go to, what art was being exhibited, where I should eat, different things like that, because I was in Italy. I'd never lived there before. I didn't know what I was doing or what I should be looking for necessarily. So I did use certain things as tools for my time there, but when I saw something, I saw it with my own eyes. I felt it with my own hands. I smelled it. I tasted it. I felt the breeze of, the sea, whatever it was. I had to go with my full self to experience it, and it was really meaningful. And of course, that's how we move in God's world. When my husband and I spent a couple months traveling around Europe a couple years later, by that point I had a smartphone. I had Instagram. In fact, I had a major problem and love for Instagram at that point. And so I had seen a lot of stuff before we planned our travels. And I don't know if you would have remembered this, it was really big for a bit. There was an airplane, there is an airplane, I'm sure it's still there. It's an abandoned US airplane on the coast of Iceland. And we were coming back to the States through Iceland, and I wanted to see it. And it wasn't all ruined by Instagram. Iceland is beautiful if you've not been, very otherworldly. You feel like you're on another planet. It's unlike anything I've ever seen when I've been traveling. And so it was still very impactful and meaningful and life-changing in that sense. But I do remember that when I actually saw the plane, my first thought was, oh, it looks just like it did on Instagram. I just kind of looked at it and I thought, I really didn't even need to see it in person. And that thought happened a number of times as we traveled around Europe. Oh yeah, it looks just like it did on the little screen that I saw. Didn't really need to see it. That is a dangerous place to be. That you think that you used one sense, and not even fully. I wasn't really seeing these things while looking through a screen, right? I was seeing a picture of the thing, not the thing itself. That is terrifying, that I thought it was not worth actually visiting because I could look at it on a screen. If you don't think that's terrifying, then maybe you haven't ventured far enough into this conversation yet. But that's not living. That takes me back to The Machine Stops by Forrester, in which it was good enough to see it on a screen. I didn't need to engage with it in reality with my whole being because I saw a glimpse of it online and that was just good enough. That is what I think is a dangerous thing, because I think that, like the enchantment in the silver chair, the smartphone is a type of evil enchantment in our day and age. I know, I'm like really going off. I understand, I'm really just laying out my possibly unpopular opinions on the internet today, but I do think that it is making us sleepy. It's putting us into a stupor when it comes to reality. We no longer really care if we experience it. We no longer really care if we understand what a human is. And if you think that I'm being a little dramatic about my evil enchantment comment, I once heard Angelina Stanford say, and I think she's totally right, that C.S. Lewis and J.R.R. Tolkien would have thought that the smartphone in your back pocket is more like the magic God forbids in scripture than anything you've read in Harry Potter. And I think she's right. It helps us manipulate man in a way that we no longer move in God's world in a humanizing way. I think that's my conclusion. I think that's where I'm at. So we've kind of covered the disembodied brain. We've talked a little bit about how we are able to engage with living in the modern world without actually having to fully be present, and that's really dangerous. And then what does that do for our view of reality, right? That's kind of our recap. The last thing I want to throw at you in this is something from, it's either Vigan or Vegan Gorian. I've never known how to say his name, but he's an educational philosopher and a fascinating thinker. He wrote Tending the Heart of Virtue, if you're curious about how classic fairy tales awaken the moral imagination in a child and in yourself. Great book. But he recently, in an article for Circe's magazine Forma, was talking about how human used to be a metaphor. In fact, everything used to be a metaphor before the scientific revolution stripped the beauty from things and turned everything into just science, right? So when you think about what is human, we come at it from a scientific definition now. We don't think that human comes from the root for earth, that we're earth people. That the incarnation, yes, it really happened, but it was a metaphor for what it means to be a person. And all of these things are lost in our modern world because we don't have the language for them. We don't have the mental images or pictures or ideas for them anymore. And in doing that, we no longer understand what a human is. And so we engage in practices and use technology that might be really harmful for us as people because we don't know what a person is. And that is really troublesome. Isn't it? It's troublesome to me, but I can't be the only one. I know I'm not the only one. So a couple of things on the way out here. I am moderating a roundtable discussion within Patreon. The link's right here so you can join us. I think we're getting close to like 400 women. It's amazing. We have really built this intentional, thoughtful community, and I love the things we discuss in there. And we will be talking about convenience and technology. I've gathered some people who disagree with me, so I think it's going to be a really good conversation. That'll be coming out in April. And then I'm also going to close out today with some lovely footage from my very talented brother-in-law, Sam Kern. I will link him below as well. I use all of his pretty nature clips. If you ever see anything like that, it's all from him. And I'm going to read you a poem from Wendell Berry, which has become my personal manifesto over the last couple of years, as I said, as I've tried to practice the acts of gentle defiance and take back the humanizing life. I'll see you guys next time. I hope you enjoy the poem. Manifesto, the Mad Farmer Liberation Front by Wendell Berry. Love the quick profit, the annual raise, vacation with pay. Want more of everything ready-made. Be afraid to know your neighbors and to die, and you will have a window in your head. Not even your future will be a mystery anymore. Your mind will be punched in a card and shut away in a little drawer. When they want you to buy something, they'll call you. When they want you to die for profit, they will let you know. So friends, every day do something that won't compute. Love the Lord. Love the world. Work for nothing. Take all that you have and be poor. Love someone who does not deserve it. Denounce the government and embrace the flag. Hope to live in that free republic for which it stands. Give your approval to all you cannot understand. Praise ignorance, for what man has not encountered, he has not destroyed. Ask the questions that have no answers. Invest in the millennium. Plant sequoias. Say that your main crop is the forest that you did not plant, that you will not live to harvest. Say that the leaves are harvested when they have rotted into the mold. Call that profit. Prophesy such returns. Put your faith in the 2 inches of humus that will build under the trees every 1,000 years. Listen to carrion. Put your ear close and hear the faint chattering of the songs that are to come. Expect the end of the world. Laugh. Laughter is immeasurable. Be joyful though you have considered all the facts. So long as women do not go cheap for power, please women more than men. Ask yourself, will this satisfy a woman satisfied to bear a child? Will this disturb the sleep of a woman near to giving birth? Go with your love to the fields. Lie easy in the shade. Rest your head in her lap. Swear allegiance to what is nighest your thoughts. As soon as the generals and the politicos can predict the motions of your mind, lose it. Leave it as a sign to mark the false trail, the way you didn't go. Be like the fox who makes more tracks than necessary, some in the wrong direction. Practice resurrection.